She's 20 minutes late and hasn't texted. And I'm already standing by the window with my jacket half on, running through exactly how I'll say goodbye to this apartment. That's not an exaggeration. 20 minutes. No text. And some old, practiced part of my brain has already packed both our bags and written the ending. I know how this sounds. I know she's probably just stuck in traffic, or her phone died, or 100 boring, ordinary reasons that have nothing to do with me. But knowing that has never once stopped the other voice. The one that's been running since I was 6 years old, the one that says, people don't tell you when they're about to disappear. They just do. The apartment is quiet enough that I can hear the refrigerator humming. And every car engine outside that isn't hers feels like a small, personal insult. I check my phone for the 4th time in 10 minutes. No new messages. Just the empty space where a text should be, which somehow feels louder than any bad news could. My father left on a Tuesday. I remember it was a Tuesday because I had soccer practice that afternoon, and he always picked me up, and that day he didn't. I stood outside the school gates for 40 minutes before a teacher noticed and called my mother. She came to get me, and her face already had the news on it before she said a word. When we got home, his side of the closet was empty. Not messy, not half-packed. Empty, like he'd planned it for weeks, like he'd been quietly removing himself from our life one hanger at a time. There was no note. No conversation. No goodbye. Just an empty closet and a mother sitting very still at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. I didn't cry that day, which I think worried her more than if I had. I just remember asking if he was coming back for my soccer trophy, because it was still in his car. He never came back for the trophy. It sat in the garage for years, and I used to look at it sometimes and think, that's worth more to him than staying. There was a birthday, my 8th, where some small stupid part of me thought he might show up anyway, just for that. I remember watching the driveway through the whole cake, watching my mother watch me watch it. He didn't come. Nobody said anything about it out loud, and that silence taught me something too. That disappearing doesn't even need an explanation. People just get to leave and never account for it. After that, I started watching the driveway. Not consciously, not every day, but if my mother's car was gone longer than expected, something in my chest would tighten before I even registered why. I slept near the front door for a while, actually near it, not in my room. My mother found me there once, curled up on the hallway floor with a blanket, and she didn't ask why. I think she already knew. Some nights I'd count the hours since she'd said she'd be back from the store, quietly. Under my breath, like counting could somehow keep her tethered to the house. Kids adapt fast, but they adapt in strange directions. Mine was this: if someone might leave without warning, the only way to survive it is to leave first. By the time I was a teenager, I had this moved down perfectly. The second a relationship started feeling real, the second someone got close enough to actually hurt me, I'd find a reason to end it. It wasn't only girlfriends. I did it with friends too. I had a best friend in high school who I stopped answering one summer. For no real reason. Just because he'd started to matter enough that losing him would have actually hurt. Years later I ran into him at a grocery store, and he asked, genuinely confused, what happened between us. I didn't have a real answer. I just remember mumbling something about being busy that summer, and he nodded like he didn't believe it either. I told myself it was because they weren't right for me. Looking back, most of them were exactly right for me. That was the problem. My first serious girlfriend, in my 20s, was patient and steady in a way I didn't know what to do with. She showed up when she said she would. She never once disappeared. And somehow that consistency scared me more than any red flag ever could have. I kept waiting for the version of her that would vanish one Tuesday with an empty closet. When she started talking about moving in together, something in me panicked in a way I couldn't explain at the time. I picked a fight over something small and stupid, and I ended it before she had the chance to. She asked me, right before she left, why I was doing this when things were good. I didn't have an answer then. I just knew that leaving first felt like the only safe option I had. There was another one after her, a few years later, and I want to say I'd learned something by then, but I hadn't. Same pattern, different name, different apartment, same exact ending written by the same scared kid. That one I didn't even leave with an argument. I just slowly stopped trying, stopped calling back quickly, stopped making plans. Until she got tired of chasing someone who was already halfway out the door. She told me once, near the end, that being with me felt like loving someone who was already grieving the relationship before it had even ended. I didn't understand what she meant until years later. For years after that, I told people I just hadn't met the right person, that I was independent, that I liked my space. What I actually meant was, I can't survive being left, so I'll never let anyone get close enough to leave. It took me a long time to see the pattern for what it was, not independence. Not high standards, just a 6-year-old still guarding an empty driveway. I started seeing a therapist in my 30s, mostly because a friend pushed me to. And for the first few sessions I kept finding polite reasons why the pattern wasn't really about my father at all. She asked me once, very simply, what does it cost you to wait and find out if someone stays? I didn't have an answer. Nobody had ever asked me to imagine actually waiting. I realized in that office that leaving first had never really protected me from the pain of being left. It had just let me control exactly when it happened, which isn't the same thing as healing at all. We talked about the job too. The one I quit right when I was about to get promoted. And the apartment lease I broke early right after I'd finally made it feel like home. Different rooms, same door slamming shut before anyone else could close it. She pointed out something I'd never noticed, that I only ever sabotaged the things that were actually going well. The mediocre stuff, the stuff that didn't matter, I let run its course just fine. That was the moment it stopped being abstract. It wasn't about being picky or independent. It was about never letting anything get good enough to be worth losing. Now, years later, standing by this window with my jacket half on because she's 20 minutes late, I can feel the old script trying to run itself again. Some part of me is already rehearsing the speech. Already deciding I should be the one to end this before she gets the chance to disappear like everyone eventually disappears. I actually walk toward the closet. I don't fully register I'm doing it until my hand is already on a duffel bag. The old, familiar motion of preparing an exit before there's even been a wound. I stop with the bag half unzipped and just stand there, staring at it. And something in me finally asks the question I never let myself ask as a kid. What if she's just late? What if not every silence is an ending? What if a person can be delayed by traffic and still come home and still love you? And none of it has anything to do with an empty closet from 30 years ago. I stand there long enough that the streetlights outside start to flicker on, one by one. And for once I don't reach for my phone to check the time again. I just let the not knowing sit there, uncomfortable and unresolved. I hear her key in the door before I've fully put the bag down. And for a second the old instinct tells me to hide what I was doing. To pretend everything is fine, the way I've pretended my whole life. My hands are still on the zipper. I could shove it in the closet in 3 seconds, put on a normal face, ask how her day was, and she would never have to know how close I came to ending this over 20 quiet minutes. That's what I would have done a year ago. That's what I did, more than once, with people before her, quietly packing an exit and calling it independence. She walks in apologizing before she even sees my face. Her phone died, she says. She had to stop and use a stranger's charger at a gas station. She's sorry. She should have found a way to tell me. She sees the duffel bag on the bed before I can move it. And her face changes, and I watch her brace for whatever this means. The way people brace when they've been hurt like this before too. I almost lie. I almost say I was just organizing the closet. That would have been so easy, and it would have kept the truth exactly where it's always lived, buried and silent. Instead, I sit down on the edge of the bed and I tell her about the Tuesday. About soccer practice. About the empty closet and the trophy that never got picked up in the hallway floor where I used to sleep. I tell her that some part of me has been trying to leave every relationship before it could leave me. And that just now, standing at that window, 20 minutes felt like the beginning of the same ending. She doesn't say it's ridiculous. She doesn't tell me to get over it. She just sits down next to me, quiet for a moment, and then she says, "I'm not your father, and I'm not going anywhere without telling you first." It doesn't fix 30 years in one sentence. I still feel my chest tighten sometimes when she's quiet too long, or when her car has gone longer than expected. But this time, instead of packing a bag, I told her the truth out loud. And she stayed to hear all of it, and for the first time in my life, leaving first didn't feel like the only option I had. We sat there for a long time after that, not saying much. Her hand resting on my knee. The duffel bag still open on the bed like evidence of a version of me I was finally ready to stop being. I still catch myself watching the door sometimes, waiting for footsteps that don't come. Old habits like that don't disappear just because you've named them out loud. Some nights I still wake up and check that her side of the bed is warm. Just to be sure. An old reflex from a driveway that's been empty for 30 years now. But now, when it happens, I remind myself of her voice in that quiet room. And I let myself believe, just a little more each time, that not everyone who loves you is already halfway out the door.